skin mesh. So first off, I want to draft the bodice, and then I'm going to write out the parameters needed. The shoulder for this child is 11. The chest roundness was 22. The half length, which is the shoulder to the waist, was 11. So now let's do the calculations. For every round measurement, I'm dividing by 4. That's the chest divided as 22 divided by 4. Gives me 5.5 plus 2 inches, that's 7. For the shoulder line, I'm going to be dividing by 2, which is 5.5. So now I'm writing down the 7.5. Same thing for the waist roundness, and for the half length I'm going to be adding just 1 inches for seam allowance, and that's 12. So let's get down to drafting the bodice. So now I'm going to first rule out a straight line. After ruling out the straight line, the next thing I want to do is to take up my my shoulder line. So my shoulder line is 5.5, so I'm going to be marking 5.5 on that line there. And the next thing I want to do is to take the armhole line or the armscissors. I'm still going to be using that 5.5. And after doing that, I'm going to be making sure that the 5.5 I have on the shoulder line correlates with what I have for the chest line. And then I'll join the armscissors line, and then I'm creating the chest line. So after doing that, I'm going to mark the half length line, which is 12 inches. So from that line, I'm going to mark 12 inches like so. And then, sorry, I'm going to be writing or making a line above that mark, but it doesn't matter. So I'm going to rule the line to connect like this. So the next thing I want to do is impute the chest line and the waistline measurement. So I'm just going to label so we all know what I just did. So this is the chest line, the waistline, the shoulder line, and this is the armscissors. This is where I get to create the armhole curve. So after this is done, the next thing I want to do is to impute the chest roundness and the waist roundness. I remember from the calculations we did, we divided the chest roundness by 4 and we added 2 inches. Same thing for the waistline, and we got 7.5. So I'm just going to impute the 7.5 directly that way, and I'll do the same thing for the other side. So when I'm done, I'm going to just join both lines like so. So we almost have our bodice ready, but then we have to take into cognizance the shoulder slope and the neck depth. For the shoulder slope, I'm going to be using 0.5 inches or 0.5 inch, and then for the width of the shoulder slope, I'll be marking 3 inches. Take note, I marked the 3 inches from the shoulder line. So the next thing I'll do is to join up this way, and then I'm going to take the armhole curve. So from that shoulder slope, I marked 0.5 to the chest line was 5 inches. So I marked the midpoint and I took ½ inch inside. Sometimes I use 0.75, depends on what I'm doing, but for this design I'm using 0.5. Next thing I'm doing is to mark 1 inch or 0.75 inches on that that point where the shoulder line meets the chest line, right? So I marked 0.5 there. I couldn't find my French curve, so I'm going to be joining these lines with my hand. So I joined them like this, just like so. I joined them like this all the way. So if you have your French curve, it makes it easier than what I was doing here. So the next thing I want to do is to take out the neck depth. So for the neckline, I'm going to doing 2.5 by 2.5, and then I'll connect just like so. Use your French curve again, please. I couldn't find mine, and I had already done this bodice. I just wanted to draft the bodice so we all see what it looked like before I started sewing. So next thing I'm going to do is to just cut this out like so. So I'm cutting this out like this, but I'm not going to be cutting off the neck depth. I'm going to be leaving this because we still have to draft our back bodice. And to make it this easier, what I'm going to do is just to get my paper, rule a straight line like a starting point, and then the next thing I'll do is to also put on the zipper allowance. So for the zipper allowance, I use 1 inch or 1.25, but I always say 1.25, and that's because when you're finishing the edges with your locker, you don't want to have a shortage, right? So I always recommend 1.25. So I'm going to join 1.25 all the way like this, and I'm joined with the ruler, and I'm going to be labeling that part as my zipper allowance. So now I have my zipper allowance on here, and then the next thing I want to do is to just bring back this front bodice to the top here, and then you can use the paper weight or something or pin it down, and then I just want to cut out this exact shape to create my back bodice. Like, it's very simple. So after I'm done creating cutting this out, I'm just going to do the necessaries, and then we're almost done to transferring this to the satin and the lace. So now I have this for my front bodice and for my back. So I'm going to be using this to cut out. I'm going to cut out the neckline, and I'll be using this full bodice to cut out the lace. Please take note. We are using this full bodice to cut out the lace and the skin mesh. So to cut out the back neck, I'm just going to be marking that neck point there so that everything is correct. So I'm using this, like I said, to cut out the lace and the skin mesh. The lace and skin mesh. So now for this, I'm just going to check how deep I want the back neck to be. So if I want the back neck to be like 5 inches deep or 5.5, I'm just going to be marking it there. I'm going to be creating a straight line like this, and then joining that marked point to that straight line, right? And then the next thing I want to do is to cut it off. So if you want the back neck to depth to be deeper, it's all depends on what you want to do. So I'm going to use this also to cut the lace and the skin mesh. Please take note, just the lace and the skin mesh. So now let's get out the satin bodice. To get out the satin bodice, I'll first decide how deep I want the neckline to be. Depends on what you want. So for me, I first tried checking out 4 inches to try it out, but I didn't really like how deep it was looking. So what I did was come to the armscye, mark 2.5 or 3 inches, and then to the center line, I'm marking 4 inches. So that way I could just join easily or draw a curve easily. So 2.5 and 4.5. The next thing I'll do is to cut this off, and I'll be using this to cut the satin and the lining. So this serves as the satin, the bodice and the lining. So now the same thing, having to get out the upper part, I'm going to transfer that point here, and then I'm just going to connect to that point where I did my back depth. And then the next thing I'll do is just to cut it out like so. So this will serve as the back bodice for the satin and the lining. So I'm just going to open this up so that we see what it looks like. And then this is also for the front bodice. And then we'll just transfer this to the satin. And I know you've already transferred the first one to the bodice. So now I have my satin transferred. I've put on the fusible so it looks thicker. And I use the satin also for the lining. And then the same thing for the bodice. Remember, when I cut the bodice without removing the illusions, I said we're going to cut the bodice and the skin mesh using the first bodice I cut out. So the next thing I want to do now is to close up the neckline and the armhole line for the front bodice. The same thing I'll be doing for the back. Close up the neckline and the armhole line for the back bodice. So you're using the skin mesh as a form of a lining. So the next thing I want to do is to trim out the excess from that seam, right? And that's just to give it a very, very neat finish. The same thing I'll do here. I'll trim this out to give it a very neat finish. I'll do the same thing for the back bodice also. It just helps to give it a very seamless finish on the neckline and the armhole. So after we are done, the next thing I want to do is to just turn it inside out to get the right face up, and then the same thing for the back also. So I'm making sure everything is all right before I iron. Take note, when you want to press this, you don't press from the lace, you press from the back. So that means you have to be using like a iron protector or fabric protector on the bodice before ironing. You don't iron on the lace, you iron from the back. Please take note. So for this back also, I'm going to be doing the same thing. If you see, this is the armhole area. I'm trimming off the excess seam, and then for the neckline area too, I'm doing the same. I'm going to do that for both, and I have the bodice ready. So what I want to do now is just to join up both side, right? I'm going to join up the shoulder lines together. So I'm placing it right side facing right side, making sure that everything is okay. And then I'm just going to join here with 1/2 inch. And after joining with 1/2 inch, this is what it looked like, right? It's looking really neat and finished now. So this is ready. I just have to make sure that the half length line correlates to giving me about 11.5, right? And that's because I already took 1/2 inch out of it. So after getting everything I wanted, the next thing I want to do is to work on the bodice. So now we have the bodice. This is the front bodice. I already infused my fusible, my interfacing. So this is going to serve as the lining. I use the satin as the lining. So I'm going to be stitching from the neckline to the armhole, and see, it is done already. I had to use a gold thread so that we can see this clearly. The next thing I want to do is just to relax the seam lines by giving it like a mark or a notch, right? So that when I iron, it's feeling very relaxed, right? So after doing this, I'm just going to take to the pressing iron and I'm going to press the neckline. So after doing that, for the back, I'm going to be doing the same thing. So this is the back bodice. I'm going to bring the lining. I use satin as the lining too because of what I wanted to achieve. Then the next thing I'm going to do is the same thing. So from the zipper allowance, not on the zipper allowance, I'm going to sew 1/2 inch that way up to the armhole line. Same thing. And after doing that, the same process, I'm going to notch the necklines, and then after notching, I'm just going to iron on the, or press on the ironing table. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to notch like so. You see, I cut off that place so that it gets really balanced and not very bulky there. So I'm just going to notch like this. And the next thing I'll do is to turn it out like so. Take to the pressing iron, do the ironing, and then let's get back to business. Thank you. So after I was done creating the bodice, just like so, the next thing I want to do is to place the lace on top of this. So I'm just going to bring the lace over, and I'm going to place on top just like so. So I'm not just going to be placing down, I'm going to be pinning down. Take note, I'm not pinning with the lining. I'm just pinning up the bodice itself with that's the front bodice itself, making sure I have the fusible, the place I attach the interfacing, as the front. So the next thing I'm going to do is to just use the pins to pin down the lace, making sure I am not picking up the linings. Yeah, that's the word. I'm not picking up the lining. So I'm just going to stitch down like so. I'll do the same thing for the back also, pinning down, making sure that I am not stitching on the linings. So now the next thing I want to do is just take up my measurements, or mark the measurements on the bodice. To do this, I'm going to be picking up front side and back side, fabric facing fabric, lining facing lining, just like so. Like this gives you that inseam finish. So I'm going to pin down, making sure that each armhole line matches themselves, like the front armhole line matches with the back armhole line. I'm going to pin also on the lining. I'm going to do the same thing for the other side of the back. Just take note, each armhole line has to match, right? After doing that, next thing I want to do is take my shape. So remember, the waist roundness was 22 and the chest roundness was 22. Now to take the measurement on the bodice, what I just do is I'm going to be dividing them by 2, and that's because now I'm dealing with the front and back. I'm not dealing with 4 sections when cutting the fabric. So the next thing I'll do is to make sure this is in place, and then let's fix in the measurement. So now using my tape roll, 22 divided by 2 is 11. So I have this as 11, right? So the next thing I'll do is to just check up what's left. So what's left when I measured was 2 inches. So remember, that was the 2 inches we added from the beginning. So I'm just going to be marking the 11 inches as taking 2 inches from each side of the measurement You get what I'm saying? From each side of the body. So I'm marking 2 inches, making sure I can mark into the lining, and then the same thing here, making sure I can mark into the lining. The next thing I will do is to use my ruler to join both lines, extending that same 2 inches to the lining part. Make sure the armhole section is balanced, and then you just extend it 2 inches to the armhole side, and that is it. So when you are done, you just bring out the pins. Everything is okay. At this point, you can now use your overlock to finish the inside of the bodice. This is what I do. I use the overlock to finish up. So next thing I want to do is to just hold up this place. So I'm just going to be taking to my machine. I'll be stitching down those points that I know would hold the bodice, the satin bodice, to the tool, to the lace bodice, and then it is held down together. So now I can go finish up the edges on my locker before attaching to my tool bed. And that is it. You have the bodice already. Did you enjoy this video? Please drop a comment, like, share, and thank you for watching. Bye.